Let's talk about the court around the tabernacle. We're going to talk about that and other things here on Wake Up to the Bible. I'm Daniel Kaplan. I'm here with my father, Dr. Kaplan, and together we're going through the books of the law, Genesis through Deuteronomy over the course of this year. Today we're going to be reading Exodus 27:9 through Exodus 19. And you shall make the tabernacle court on the southern side. There shall be hangings for the court of twisted linen, 100 cubits in length for each side, or for one side. And its posts shall be 20, and their sockets 20 of bronze. The hooks for the posts and their bands shall be of silver. And thus for the northern side in length the hangings shall be 100 cubits, and its posts 20, and their sockets 20 of bronze, and the hooks for the posts of silver. And the width of the court on the western side, 50 cubits of hangings. Their posts shall be 10, and their sockets 10. And the width of the court on the side to the very east, 50 cubits. And 15 cubits of hangings for the flank, their posts 3, and their sockets 3. And for the other flank, 15 cubits of hangings, their posts 3, and their sockets 3. And for the gate of the court, a screen of 20 cubits, indigo and purple and crimson and twisted linen, embroider's work, their posts 4, and their sockets 4. And all the posts around the court shall be banded in silver, their hooks silver, and their sockets bronze. The length of the court 100 cubits, and the width 50 throughout, and the height 5 cubits, twisted linen, and their sockets bronze. So for all the vessels of the tabernacle and all its service, and all its pegs, and all the pegs of the court shall be bronze. So here we have the concept of a court around the tabernacle. So it's not just the Holy of Holies. It's not just the structure. There's even a structure around the structure, right? So it's multiple, there's a level even to that, right? And why do you suppose there's, this many levels of things?
So the reading ended before we got to the lampstand at the end here.
That is correct.
So that begins next week's reading.
I guess so.
Okay.
I mean, it's 20 and 21 does appear to be next week.
Okay.
So it's how they broke it up, unless there's a difference in the the Hebrew versus the English. I will double check to make sure that's not the case.
No, but that's okay.
That there is not, and I should be reading that. Hold on, just a minute. Because yeah, it is kind of a strange place to end it, if you ask me. Although I guess I should not say that.
No, they had their reasons.
Yeah, it's the same. So yeah.
Well, we have the tabernacle
that I can see.
We have the tabernacle. In other words, we want to define the space that is for the sanctuary. So we have an outer building. Then within that we have the divisions. We have the holy place and the holy of holies.
Yeah, I think they just wanted to end with the whole court.
Right. Right, and there's a courtyard as you.
Right.
As you approach.
So why do you suppose there's that? I mean, that is 3 levels. That's kind of nice, right? Because you have the courtyard, the holy, and the holy of holies. So that's nice.
Right.
But why do you suppose there's this concept, right? Why isn't everything done in the structure? Is that just? I guess that's a somewhat of a practical thing, right? But.
Right.
And then, but what's interesting is the stuff done outside the structure. There's still a bit of separation around that. One thing I can think of is what was done in the courtyard. What was what was the purpose for it?
I think isn't that where the altar was?
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. I was asking kind of a rhetorical question.
So more people will be coming in and bringing in their.
One reason I think why there may be that separation is because why did people have to go to the altar? They had to go to the altar for sin offering, so it does give a certain amount of privacy, which is nice. Just to a certain extent, right? Or am I wrong? Am I misunderstanding?
How are we dividing up the building? What's in the in the second part? You have the Holy of Holies. What's in the second? What's in part?
The spot on the other side of the curtain.
Yeah.
And then you have the court.
Right. Well, isn't that altar in that court area?
Right.
So what's the privacy part of it?
Because it's curtained around. It's fenced. Right? That's the whole point of the court, isn't it?
Well, you walk into the building and there's an open area there.
No. Around the gate of the court, a screen of indigo and linen and all.
Oh, okay, I see.
The whole thing is fenced. It's like a privacy fence, isn't it?
I see. All right.
That's how I've always seen it pictured, and I thought that's what this is getting at. Is
Well,
that
yeah,
there was a
there's privacy once you bring the sacrifice.
yeah, so nobody gets to see you do that because that's a private matter, right? You could have had it to where the altar would be just out on display and everybody gets to give their sacrifice and they see you do it. But here, they might see you go into the courtyard, but they don't see you do that.
Okay, I hadn't thought of it that way. I thought that many people could be there waiting with their animals to
But those are also maybe, but those are also people that are in the same situation as you, which
correct.
is not that's like a support group or something,
All right,
that's
that's
not
fair enough.
quite the same. I think there's
I
a
was
certain
misunderstanding it.
yeah, yeah. My point is I think the idea that there's a certain amount of privacy
Yes,
in terms of the handling of
I
sin
would
is something
agree.
we could get out of the fact that there's a court.
I would agree.
You know,
I would agree.
I think the public grievance, the public, the airing the public grievances of sin is something that is we do need to confess to one another. But I think sometimes we might oversell the public grievances of sin
Well,
if you
yeah,
kind of look at how this is being handled.
yeah. Okay, I agree with
You
you.
know, I mean, it's just something to think about. Certainly in terms of what you demand of others, right? In terms of the way that they, the penance they show in public and things like that.
Oh, yeah, right.
I think there's a lot demanded of people now. And I don't know if that, I mean, always, but I don't know if that's always
Well, it
necessary.
depends. If you're a public official and you violate, your office, then yes,
Of course.
there's accountability
Well,
there.
I mean, but that's something
But
where
that,
the offense is to multiple people, right? Depending on what
right,
it
yeah,
is.
but
Yeah.
no, but right. So you right. I wanted to mention that the lampstand came up
But I mean, let's go.
before we get to the
Yeah,
lampstand.
before we get to the lampstand, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
I'm just gonna go back. But look at
yeah,
King David, right? At some point, he would have had to go and give some sort of sacrifice. But again, it would have been in a courtyard. It would have been fenced off. It wouldn't have been like, all
right.
right, everybody, I'm sorry. Here's a big thing I'm gonna do in front of everybody. It's not, and I'm not saying I don't know what he did. He might have put out some sort of apology that got spread around or something. I don't know.
I doubt that. But now it's in the Bible for everybody to see.
Well,
But
sure,
yeah,
but my
no,
point
but
is
it wasn't then.
my point
Yeah,
right. My point
right.
is cultural practice because this is what
Yeah.
this is talking
It was
about, right?
after his death,
And
I
I would
suppose.
say,
Right.
this tabernacle system does not support the cultural practice that we kind of put people in the stocks. It's that when people are doing things in order to, there's people getting pushed out of the camp and stuff like that. We'll get to that, and there's punishments. But I don't know. Maybe I'm just grasping, but I think there's something to that. I think there's something to the fact that there was this extra area. It didn't have to be there. They could have just had the altar outside, but they have this extra
All
separation, and I
right.
think there's something to that we shouldn't just disregard. And maybe I'm not giving the best analysis of it, but it's something to think about. That's all
Right.
I'm saying.
And regarding the lampstand, I just want to make
Sorry.
one comment on it that
I'm sorry.
we will discuss it
We will.
at greater length because
Of
it comes
course.
up again
Yeah.
the next
Comes up a
meeting.
lot.
So there's a lot to say about it, but I'll hold that.
Well, why? We could talk about it. Do you want to talk about it next week? Oh,
Yeah,
because we're going to talk about it next week.
because we're going to read about it again,
Ah, I see.
and we'll also read about it later on in the law too.
Hmm.
Yeah, so it'll come up, here and there. So, but I want you to know that there's a lot more to say about the lampstand.
All right.
All right.
I'm going to go even further with, I don't know what you want to say, what that was just a minute ago, a midrash or whatever, where I'm kind of extrapolating a principle from it. Here's another principle. Inside the
I'm
structure.
not sure I fully understood your point. I mean, because let's say that
Well, that's good. You tell.
let's say that you have a celebrity
Yes.
who's always talking about, let's say, the environmental uh, problems, and
Hmm.
then we find out that that person is really living a lavish lifestyle and doing everything he's telling other people not to do.
Hmm.
Well, then he ought to publicly apologize, in my opinion.
Yes,
Because
but I'm not getting at that. I'm
okay, I'm
not
not
getting
sure
at
what you are getting at. That's
the
what
sacrificial system wasn't an apology. The sacrificial system
right.
was your personal penance for something. So I don't think that celebrity would have to post pictures every day of them doing some sort of difficult thing on themselves in order to prove to anybody else that they learned the point. The point is that they should say, I'm sorry, and then we say, okay, and that's it. We don't have to see their process of repentance. The process of repentance can be private.
All right. Okay, I understand now.
So, in my opinion, like let's say a pastor stole money from a bank or something, right? Obviously, he would have to go in front of his congregation and he could say, this is horrible. I've sinned. Maybe there's some sort of, church system that has to be dealt with. But in terms of his personal responsibility, he doesn't have to go on Facebook filming himself praying to God, showing how sorry he is.
No, of course not.
And I'm not even sure if that would be appropriate considering
No,
that. I mean,
no,
it's certainly not culturally similar to this.
no.
Do you know what I mean?
Right.
There's a very big difference between apologizing to you and you showing your relationship to God in
Right.
some sort of virtue signaling way.
Yeah, right. Okay.
That's what I'm getting at.
All right. Okay.
It's kind of like when Jesus was like, the people, they go to pray at the synagogues, they blow their trumpet and stuff like that. We're trying to get away from that. We're trying to get away from, look at my relationship with God and how great it is,
Right.
And so I think that's that separation. Now,
okay, very good.
Does that make sense now?
Makes sense now.
Okay. Yeah, I'm certainly not trying to say that people don't have to apologize. You have to. I mean,
you have the floor. Continue.
You're supposed to rebuke somebody and see if they repent, right? Yeah, no, that's true.
Let us hear more of this matter, like the Athenians.
No, but the more of the matter is, okay, so we have this fence around the outside. What does this fence not have? It does not have cherubim. The other two did. This one does not. What does that also tell us? What do you get from that? Because there's a difference.
Oh, I thought you were going to give your.
I mean, I could, but I want to hear your take before I do.
I hadn't focused on that particular matter.
No. But what might come to mind? What might you think? I want to see if we're on the same page. You have the curtain between the holy and the holy of holies with cherubim. You have the curtains all within the tabernacle itself with cherubim. Then you have the courtyard, no cherubim.
Well, it may be that you need to sacrifice before you go any further.
I like that. Yeah. The other thing I was thinking is how do you broadcast yourself to the outside world? Do you necessarily have to be so religiously iconography oriented to just the average person? Imagine somebody visits their encampment, which happens, right? People come, Balaam comes, he says your tents are beautiful and stuff.
Right.
What he would have seen at the tabernacle is not a representation of the religiosity. It would have been just bland, would have just been generic.
That's a good point.
Now, I think that's important because your best foot forward is not always to throw in a lot of things that people are not really capable of understanding or might misconstrue.
That's a very good point.
So we need to be careful.
I've always said, that's been something I've focused on over the years.
And let's look at a modern example, okay? Should your church building from the outside necessarily display the same sort of things it does inside? I would say no. Does that mean your church shouldn't be obviously a church with religious content? No, that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is there might be religious content that if you give to the outside, you paint a mural and they see on the outside, they may get the wrong impression because they simply do not have the spiritual understanding that you do. And I don't mean to be insulting, but you know what I mean? Like, I've seen stuff where it could be some sort of iconography. I mean, you were talking about the halo thing, right? You put that on the outside of your building, and you might be like, wow, those people are idiots. They think people used to walk around with a big golden glow around their head all the time. Isn't that ridiculous? And why are you doing that to yourself? Let them come to maturity, let them come into the fold, let them come into the community, and then you can be more intimate. Art is intimate. It's sharing your personality. We don't necessarily have to be like quite that explicit to just any Joe Blow. We should be careful with that. That's kind of what I'm getting at.
That's a good point.
That's what I'm getting
at. I was going to say something earlier. A person who is now well, he grew up Greek Orthodox and now he's returned to it.
Mm-hmm.
But a brilliant scholar, a Cypriot, Greek Orthodox person, Greek Cypriot. He, of course, he also lived in the UK. Now he lives in the United States. But he told me that the reason for the iconography in the early years was because the population was largely illiterate. So this was a way of illustrating the Bible to them. So that's somewhat of a defense for it. But I would say perhaps the church should have been more aggressive in getting people, teaching people to read.
Oh, you mean the modern church, like the Catholic Church or things like that?
No, I'm talking about the medieval church.
Yeah.
When the iconography became popular, now it's a standard tradition. But I'm saying when the church made the decision to go that route,
right?
He said they made the decision to go that route because the average person at that point was illiterate. So this was a way of illustrating the.
Yeah, but that doesn't really logically follow because my point is your external presentation, right? Because let's imagine you are a church and you have a very strict, second commandment sort of policy, and then you put something on the outside of your church
No,
that,
no, no. I'm talking. No, I'm going back to an earlier point.
okay, I'm
Just
sorry.
the whole concept of iconography.
Oh, I
Not what
see.
you're saying. Let's
Well,
say
I
it's.
think you
Let's
can't
say.
be down on iconography because the Bible uses it. So the idea that you only do it for illiteracy is silly. Not to mention the Bible does iconography through language. It's constantly
Well,
using
yeah.
visual
All right.
metaphor.
Fair enough.
So how can you get rid of iconography? That makes no
Well,
sense.
maybe he was trying to defend it in a culture which.
I mean, even Jesus will talks about, not one jot or tittle. Like he uses, that's iconography in a sense to make a point. Like they're
All
just
right. I see.
all of it. I don't know. That's a little strange. I mean, I'm not saying there isn't a mechanical purpose to that because I think that is a reason for iconography, but I don't think it's just because we are not literate. Because people use iconography all the time, even though a lot of people are literate.
Oh,
Why do companies have logo? It's shorthand. It's
yeah.
helpful.
All right.
It's branding.
Okay. All right.
It demonstrates a point.
All right.
Well, think of it this way. Nowadays in conversation, what do people do more and more? They do animated GIF or GIF, if you are bothered by that
Right.
pronunciation. But they do that, and it represents a lot
Yeah.
in just a visual image.
Right.
You'll show somebody who looks really shocked, but in a certain kind of way,
Yeah.
and
Right.
you get so much more across. It's actually a very convenient way of having conversations that I would love to see a linguistic person extrapolate from because it's fascinating.
Okay.
It's really fascinating, but it makes a lot of sense.
Right. Okay.
But when God uses visual metaphors, there's multiple layers. People look at those metaphors and they draw so many different things from it because visual is not the same as just a word. I mean, words have different meanings too, but you know what I mean. There's a value to that. But my point, what I was getting at was, if a church has iconography on the
Yeah, I
outside
agree with
and
that.
it's like what do they do, worship idols in there or
I,
something,
I,
and that's not what they're doing, then you can really give the wrong impression,
yeah, I agree.
or who knows what, their view of God is that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so I think you've got to be careful with how much you show. And if you look at this example, the example is nothing. And I'm not saying that means you can't have anything, but the example is nothing. Keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Keep that in mind. There's nothing untruthful about having nothing. It is just the thing. You know what I mean? So,
Well, I don't think you even have to have some sign out indicating this is a church. You could just have a nice building,
no, no,
and
of
people
course,
could
right,
drive by and say, "What's that building?" It's a
right,
church. Okay,
right.
fine.
Yeah.
You don't have to necessarily have a big,
Mm-mm.
have like a
And if
neon
you're a
sign.
Christian, sometimes I don't have to, I'm not mocking Christians that walk around with statements of truth or things like that. But when you're just speaking to the general world and they're going to reduce your thought to that, you've got to think about such things, right? And maybe that isn't really the appropriate place necessarily to be sharing that kind of information. Or what kind of iconography you have, not even like a verse or something. Imagine it's some sort of visual illustration of something. What might they get out of that from a religious context that could be wrong? You kind of have to take the opposite view. How you're viewing it is one thing. What's the worst possible interpretation? Because that might be what a lot of people are thinking. And it is interesting, like I said, in the commandment that they are not. And I don't think there's any iconography on the outside of the temple either. It's a pretty building. But
Right,
there's
right,
nothing like that.
right,
There's nothing to indicate it's a religious building per se. Like, there's nothing,
right,
you know,
right,
and I think
right.
that's important. I think that's important to know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not. I don't want to criticize people who are
No,
have some kind of thing written
I'm
on a
not either. I'm
T-shirt
just
or whatever.
no, no, no. And honestly, I find that very encouraging at times. And I think
I don't do it, but I don't
no,
want
no,
to
no. I
criticize
find
those
that
who do.
encouraging sometimes, and I have worn stuff that has religious content before. I'm not saying you can never do it. I'm just saying there's an intentionality to it that we need to be careful about. And especially, as a whole group, as
Right.
a whole culture, that's even different than the individual level, right? That
Yeah.
is, you put all your resources towards this project. How, how much does your project need to wear spiritual components on its sleeve? I think it's something you should ask. It's not being deceptive. There's nothing deceptive about the fact that the outside of the tabernacle was not blatantly anything.
Right.
That's
Yeah.
my point.
Right. Yeah.
Let's be careful because I know people get judgmental. They'll get
Yeah.
judgmental of charities that are religiously based, but they're like, well, how come they're not called Christian whatever, or how come they don't do this, or and
Yeah. Right.
that might not be fair criticism. That might not be fair criticism.
Well, I often point out Book of Esther. does not mention God's name
Right.
explicitly. Song of Solomon
And
does
it
not.
also shows the value of not always wearing it on your sleeve, right?
Right. Song of
Because
Solomon
the
does
fact
not.
that she was essentially like this, she was the outside of the tabernacle, is what saved everybody at the
Right.
end.
Yeah. Right.
Because it wasn't until there was a point in which there was a level of intimacy with another person that she gave them the information.
Right.
So timing matters.
For such a
So,
time as this. Yeah.
right. All right. So timing is hard in conversation. All right. So anyway, anything else before we go further? Hopefully, over the course of this week, we've made a case as to why all these details about the tabernacle might have mattered more than you might have thought before. So that was my goal. So I hope I did it. Because I honestly like this section of the Bible a lot more, just having to focus on it. So, anything else?
No. We'll talk more about the lampstand and other
You're really excited about that
and other
lampstand.
matters as we
The lampstand will return.
and the showbread. We'll talk more about the showbread.
Yes. Will show us the bread.
Right. We'll talk about that more.
Showbreads and shofars and chauffeurs. It's all going to come your way.
Okay.
All right. So please like, subscribe, hit the bell. It's a great year to read the law. Oh, for some reason it's not working.